The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy to relish.
Welcome to the podcast. It is May 12th. Excuse me, March. It's March 12th. Wednesday. Welcome to today's episode. Got over 40 stories to get to, so we're going to get into it. There is some movement on the economy, on the economic crisis. Don't forget, Joe Biden and his administration kept spending, shoveling money out of the door to the very end. All right, let's get into the news for today, Wednesday, March 12th. All right, first up, news from the Wall Street Journal. Inflation hit 2.8 in February, less than expected. A core reading also eased, but looming tariffs may keep consumer prices rising. No. People, even the Wall Street Journal should know better than this. Now, I'm no economist. However, tariffs aren't inflation. Rising prices are not always inflation. So if there is a rise in prices for whatever reason, sure, prices are inflated, but that's not always considered inflation. Inflation is going down because they're getting control of federal spending, which was the cause of inflation. It wasn't supply chain issues. It was Biden administration spending, and that was the only way he could keep the stock market going, is flooding markets with money. And what happens if there's no demand for that money, like in the case of the $20 billion they were trying to hide, $2 billion going to Stacey Abrams, that money causes inflation because you're printing money. And we're going to get into real conservatives like Tom Massey in just a second. But first, the National Review. The beatings will continue until markets improve. They're relating to the punishment of the correction, which is not really being helped that much by Trump. At the same time, we're having market corrections, doing corrections of his own as far as policy are concerned. So it's going to be a little turbulent. Could be a month or two. It could be 6 months. Could be as much as a year. I say months. I say you'll see there be a considerable economic change within a month or two. I think we're already seeing the winds change there. Well, let's get into the headlines today. Fox Business is reporting Trump's 25% tariff increase on all steel, aluminum imports take effect, prompting retaliation from Europe. The tariff increase came after Trump threatened Canada with doubling the duty to 50% on its steel and aluminum imports, and that's because of Premier Ford's reckless threatening to raise energy prices, electricity prices on people in the North Midwest, Northeast. Zero Hedge has the headline, core consumer price inflation slows in 4 years as energy and airfare costs tumble. And this has to do with the energy costs going down. The energy costs going down in terms of consumable fuel, fossil fuels. Now let's get into the row with Canada. The Post-Millennial is reporting U.S. and Canada to renegotiate USMCA. Canada suspends 25% charge on electricity exports. As a result of their discussions, Lutnick confirmed that he will meet with Ford in Washington on Thursday. That's tomorrow, March 13th. So if you didn't know, so Premier Ford, as I explained, threatened because of the tariffs that were going to go into effect today, that Ford, I was going to say Rob Ford, but I think that was his brother that died, the cocaine guy. But in any case, he was going to jack up by 25% electricity costs that is generated in Canada and shipped, electricity shipped to the United States because of the tariffs. So they're not, it's apples and oranges, so it doesn't even really fit. It's going to cause pain to electricity consumers in America without affecting the trade that is an issue here. So Ford bent, and as One American News is reporting, Canada drops 25% electricity tariff following Trump's retaliation threat. And what was that retaliation threat? Well, first, following President Donald Trump's threats to increase steel and aluminum tariffs on Canada to 50%, Ontario Premier Doug Ford, it's Doug Ford, not Rob Ford, suggested on Tuesday that Canada is caving, announcing that he reached an agreement with U.S. Commerce Secretary Lutnick to halt the 25% tax on power imports to the U.S. So I know the markets are in disarray because they don't know what's going to happen with Trump's threat of tariffs. They don't know if Trump will actually go through with them. You know he will. But Trump is only doing this to get a better deal for the United States. My bet is, and his bet I think is also correct, is that the American market is so sought after that the opponents, except for maybe China, the opponents to Trump's tariff proposals will cave in the long run. We've seen it happen time and time again. Will they hold out longer than usual? I think they will. But it's not going to benefit anybody in the long run to go into a trade war with the U.S. The U.S. is still the most powerful economy on the planet. Anybody who seeks to go into a trade war with the United States will lose. And that includes China. And China knows this too, but they're trying to act tough. So more news on financing. The Associated Press is reporting House passes bill to fund federal agencies through September. Those prospects unclear in Senate. So the House bill is going to the Senate now. Am I still having problems with Rumble? I was going to simulcast today. I didn't wake up late. I just, for some reason, wasn't able to meet the 10 a.m. live stream mark. And so it's a little more complicated to multi-stream. So, but for some reason, Rumble is still, I didn't know if it was because Rumble was hacked or they were dealing with a cyber attack. But if you're having trouble seeing this, if the stream is hanging up on you, you could watch it later, where I post on BitChute, Rumble, Substack, and Spotify. So in any case, getting back to this story on the House bill, so this is a clean CR, it's continuing resolution. If you're not really sure how the budget process is working, we haven't had a budget in some time. And so they keep doing what's called continuing resolution, which means just to fund the government so the government doesn't shut down. So a clean CR means funding for the government only. No pork is moved in there. No special add-ons, line items. So the problem is, and this CR passed on party line vote. So the Democrats blocked the budget, and then they went ahead and they blocked or tried to block the CR. So all the Democrats are resistant to compromise. So why the party that is not in power refuses to compromise? They look like petulant children. Now, why would they vote against the CR? They want to shut down the government. It was a clean CR, so there's nothing in it except funding the government. So I don't understand that it's resist anything Republicans do, I suppose. It's called obstructionism. Let's see if I can't get my feed here. I was worried that Rumble would pose problems again today, so stick with me a second. All right, moving on with the stories here. So you might have heard about this story revolving around the CR. The Post-Millennial is reporting Trump says Thomas Massie should be primaried over opposition to spending bill. He should be primaried, and I will lead the charge against him. I don't think that's wise for Trump to do. Now, Thomas Massie, as I've said, he considers himself a libertarian, which is great, as I do. But he is the most conservative member of Congress, which means he opposes all spending and all relative pork. So he is opposed to the CR because he believes we should have a budget, which I agree. I think this is a bad move by Trump because people like Thomas Massie. And we have a headline here from Just the News. Libertarian Party throws support behind Massie and feud with Donald Trump over CR. I'm in the Massie camp. So I don't always agree with his decisions and his votes, etc. But for the most part, I do, because I believe I've always been a fiscal conservative, but that's what conservatives are. The social conservatism or cultural conservatism is a misnomer. I don't believe the government should be spending a lot of money because those are our tax dollars. Not only are they our tax dollars, but they borrow on our future tax dollars, on our children's and grandchildren's and their grandchildren's tax dollars, which I think is a travesty. Moving on in the headlines here, we have another headline from Zero Hedge. Futures yields dollar all jump ahead of key CPI report. U.S. equity futures are higher into today's CPI print, with tech outperforming as the rout that crippled markets in the past 2 weeks receded after Trump downplayed the risk of a tariff-led recession. An acceleration of the trade war is not impacting global equities. As we had imagined, okay, there was that, I'm going to get in that dust up with the AP reporter and Carolyn Levitt in the White House press briefing room, and that's going to explain a lot. I got the feed going. That's good. Okay, so let's move on to the next headline, shall we? Another headline from Zero Hedge. Core consumer price inflation slowest in 4 years. I think I went over that headline already. I got two in here. All right, let's move on to the post-millennial. Marco Rubio says Ukraine must make land concessions to end war with Russia. Rubio made these remarks while en route to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, where he was scheduled to meet with a senior Ukrainian official. So we know what the deal is. So the deal is there will be no land concessions by Russia. and that goes into the security concern. So the only way to peace is to relinquish Crimea and the Donbass. And I don't have a problem with that because there's no American interest there. And there's indeed the very fate of Russia lies in Crimea and the Black Sea. And that's why that's why NATO is so keen on getting into Ukraine, is to rule over the Black Sea. Associated Press reports U.S. resumes military aid and intelligence sharing as Ukraine says it is open to a 30-day ceasefire. So right after, I don't think I have the report here. So right after they did that, Russia launched a massive missile attack on Ukraine. The AP story goes on to say Republicans needed, what is this? Oh, I'm sorry. This is text from the budget. If you wanted to know the vote on the budget, it was 217 to 213. Only one Republican, Thomas Massey, voted against the CR. All Democrats. Oh, excuse me. One Democrat, Jared Golden of Maine, voted for the CR. So there were two defections, one from each party. So, talking about Ukraine, so you might have heard this yesterday that Musk claims the coordinated cyber attack against X originated in the Ukraine area. This is from One American News. I also believe that the assassination of InfoWars reporter Jamie White was also an assassination ordered from Ukraine. So Ukraine is the nesting area for all the Black Hawks, all the war hawks, and the people involved in covert warfare, surveillance, espionage, all those things, bio warfare, all the nasties of the nasties are nesting in Ukraine right now. So it's not surprising that that cyber attack came from Ukraine. Was it actual Ukrainians behind the keyboard? I don't think so. Was the assassin of Jamie White, the InfoWars reporter, was that a Ukrainian? No. I mean, it could have been an Antifa guy, and more than likely was. Was the money... Did the money come from Ukraine? I don't know. Did the order come from Ukraine? Did it come from the CIA? We don't know. Did the money come from George Soros and one of the affiliated NGOs, maybe, that funds Antifa groups? Who knows? But it was an assassination because he got shot in the neck. And assassins will do that. And this is much like what happened on January 6th with the person that was killed there. She was shot in the neck. In the same fashion, is because you're going to bleed out. It's a painful and excruciating death, and usually done as a warning, because if you shoot somebody in the head, they die immediately. So if you want to inflict a great deal of suffering and make sure that they actually die, you would shoot him in the neck. So he was shot in the neck. He put his arm up, and he was shot through the arm into the neck. So it seems like somebody came at him with a pistol out, and the reaction was probably, But the police say that he interrupted a burglary of his car. Well, I think he was coming home. I don't think he was going out. They're trying to say that he came out of his apartment to confront somebody who was breaking into his car. Yeah, I don't know. I would never do that in the middle of the night without a weapon. You would never confront a criminal unarmed. So I think he was coming home, and he got out of his car, and somebody was laying in wait, O.J. Simpson style, and came out of the darkness and fairly close range, I would imagine. Pow. Continuing with this story, this is the post-millennial InfoWars host Chase Geyser swatted after co-worker fatally shot in Austin. Chase Geyser said, I just got swatted. We were both on the same Ukraine enemies of the state list. Seems unrelated to what happened to Jamie, but related to the fact that we've been reporting about who's on the list. All right. So we may have a Tuesdays with Perry tonight. So that's something to stay tuned for. We usually go live at 9:15. So stay tuned for another edition of Tuesdays with Perry tonight. More headlines from Zero Hedge. China summons Walmart after asking suppliers to absorb Trump's tariffs. So if you didn't know, there were tariffs put on China, and that affects Walmart. So really, for most people, tariffs won't, unless you drink Mexican beer or eat avocados. You don't probably consume anything from Canada, but you might consider, if you shop at Walmart, you'll consume a lot of shit made in China. So Walmart had previously asked China to absorb the tariffs. So China summons Walmart executives to China to discuss it. They did it last time China absorbed the tariffs. And this is where people, the misnomer of tariffs, it's a tax on consumers. It's not. The exporter or importer, whatever, usually they're the same entity, have to pay the tariff. Usually the exporter that exports into the United States has to pay the tariff. And they have the choice whether to pass that on to the people, if it's a separate entity importing, or onto the customer. Because if you do that, you're going to chase away your customers if you raise prices, if you pass that on to the consumer. And that the end is people will go to an American supplier if those goods are cheaper. That's the whole point of tariffs, why it's protectionism, is because you raise the cost of people importing goods. And so the imported goods are going to be more expensive than the domestic goods. And that way, the domestic goods take preference with consumers, and that helps jobs and wage growth and lots of other things. Globalism is bad for the American worker. Another headline from post-millennial: Trump administration rejects UN's 2030 sustainability goals as adverse to the rights and interests of Americans. A program of soft global governance that is inconsistent with U.S. sovereignty and adverse to the rights and interests of Americans. The 2030 sustainability goals are indeed the start of the New World Order. I believe the exact date is Christmas of 2030. That's the end of the year 2030, where they're supposed to switch on the New World Order. That's bad for humans all over the globe. And the only reason they want sustainability is they want to try to clean up the world before they get rid, and I'm talking about the elite cabal here, get rid of most of the humans. You know, they want to get rid of all the pollution that all these humans made. Federalist is reporting, if the United States doesn't build more ships, China will rule the waves, perhaps. Post-millennial: AP clashes with White House press secretary over the questions of tariffs. I now regret giving a question to the Associated Press, says Caroline Levitt. And I just wanted to wedge in the ships issue there, because it is, after all, a battle for global dominance by the globalists who are rooting for China because they want to change the system, the New World Order system. The agenda of the New World Order is a top-down corporate fascism, corporate administrative state, global state, that pushes communism and socialism down on the masses. And so they want that authoritarian system because they look at it as more efficient. They always have, because you think people like Hitler or Mussolini, or how do they get into power? You think they just get into power? They don't have any money, or they don't have anybody backing them. They just, pick up some guns. How do they get the guns without money? And they just stroll into power. Never the case. Hitler was backed by corporations. Mussolini was backed by corporations and the Catholic Church. That's the whole point about fascism. Fascism is you team up with other pillars of power to rule in an authoritarian manner. And so the authoritarianism is what you have in common. So in any case, if you didn't know about this clash with Carolyn Levitt and the AP reporter, who the AP was not banned from the briefing room, they were banned from the pool, which means they don't get to travel around with the president. And because it was a personal thing with the president, the Associated Press didn't want to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, and so Trump said, you're out. So during Wednesday's White House press conference, a reporter from the Associated Press got into an argument with the White House press secretary, Caroline Levitt, over tariffs instituted by the Trump administration. The reporter, Josh Boak, said Trump's big push while on the campaign trail was for tax cuts, but proposing tax hikes in the form of tariffs. And this is where we disagree. Obviously, so does Caroline Levitt. The fact being that tariffs are not a tax hike on consumers. You could argue that inflation is a tax on everyone, because it's a payback. It's not really taxes raise revenue for the government to spend. Inflation as a tax is funds government already spent that end up coming out of your pocket anyway. I think it's insulting that you're trying to test my knowledge about economics and the decisions that this president has made. I now regret giving a question to the Associated Press. Why did she say that? Is because this reporter says, I'm sorry, have you ever paid a tariff? Because I have, Boak stated. They don't get charged on foreign companies, they get charged on the importers. No. So this Associated Press reporter is an importer? I don't understand. Why is he an Associated Press reporter if he runs an importing business or did run an importing business? It doesn't make any sense. Like I was a journalist for 30 years. I didn't have another business importer, exporter on the side. What is he? George Costanza? They get charged on the export, the person that imports the goods. So if it's not the same as the exporter, the transaction of bringing goods in the United States is taxed, that tariff. So if you decide to be an importer of Chinese goods, maybe you should go into another business. The point is tariffs, it's protectionism. And Trump's real point is he wants a better deal. He doesn't want to not have those goods come into the country, but he wants to, if the American markets are going to be open to foreign goods, then those same countries should be open to American goods. That's free trade. But what they call free trade is not always fair trade because it still involves protectionism on the point of in the form of other countries having VAT or tariffs or what have you. They always say free trade. You mean free trade into the United States. And that allows businesses to export jobs. That ruins the economy. So as they're doing that, they're bringing in more workers and funding AI, which is going to displace jobs even further. So that formula hasn't been working. So the Federalist is reporting voters strongly support election integrity reforms amid crisis and confidence. A poll conducted earlier this year with RMG Research found less than half, 45%, of 1,000 registered voters surveyed said they were very confident that the votes were accurately counted and the proper winners were declared in the past few election cycles. And that's Republicans and Democrats. It's 45%. Are these people been hiding under a rock? Now, you could argue before mail-out ballots, you could argue that that was the case, right? But with mail-out ballots, there is no way that there is so much fraud going into the accounting of voters, of Social Security recipients, of everything involved in government, is they just change numbers, elevate numbers for the most part, because the bigger the number, whether it's census or whatever, the more money comes in. And it's all about getting those Benjamins. All right, so the Federalists, again, COVID taught Americans to stop trusting government that put them last. That's indeed the reaction to the novel Wuhan coronavirus. Did the country a similar service by revealing new fault lines, 2 sets of rules, which were applied differently to Americans depending on their membership in certain political cliques. For the average American who assumed his political leaders still shared the belief that all men are created equal, it was a cruel betrayal. And the reason I stuck this in here is because this is the fact, is that you as an individual without means, unless you're a billionaire, really, even if you have $1 million or you're a millionaire, you can't use that money to pry political interest. So you're just a guy working his everyday job. You saw how the pandemic cruelly influenced your life and dictated things, a lot of times through fear that you might have bought into those fears, as you might still do. But remember, everything you're told for the most part is a lie. And if you could get that into your head, are people telling the truth? Sure, there are people telling your truth, but you have to go on the assumption that what you're being told is a lie. And the motivation for that lie is almost immaterial. But you should understand that there is a motive behind it, and getting to that motive will lead you to the truth. However, the best way to get to the truth is realize that you're being lied to, for the most part. Maybe not by your family, well, maybe your kids. Your kids, if you have kids, they're going to lie to you. Your wife could lie to you, so maybe your family lies to you too. Or maybe your wife tells you the truth, but still, you got to protect yourself. And particularly with government. Speaking of lies, PJ Media is reporting U.S. aid official told staff to shred documents, report claims. So this is basically U.S. Agency for International Development official told the gutted agency's remaining staff to go on a spree of destroying documents. This happened also at the FBI. So, when the investigators are at the door, that's what you're doing. You're destroying the evidence of your malfeasance. So I'm sure USAID was doing it. This is a report from Politico, actually. And PJ Media says, if the report from Politico is accurate, it's time to raid U.S. aid for documents and shut down the agency altogether immediately. Of course, Politico is hardly the most reliable source, but corrupt federal officials have track record of tampering with documentation to cover their tracks. Indeed. I mean, you can just look at Hillary Clinton. She destroyed subpoenaed evidence in her emails, in her email case. The reason she destroyed those emails and destroyed all those devices and BitBleach, which is just an erasure program. So she was subpoenaed for that evidence. Basically, what the Clinton Foundation was doing is she would put classified information on a server in her bathroom at her home in Chappaquiddick, New York. And hackers from certain governments. So it was a digital dead drop. So she'd put the information in there. They would hack into her computer that, had no security. And then mysteriously, they would donate millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation. That's espionage. So, and Joe Biden tried to do something similar. We haven't gotten to the bottom of it, but I think it goes along the lines of they get money from the Chinese Communist government, Chinese agents, maybe their gardener in Delaware goes into the garage and takes documents, or they had keys to the Penn State. I forget what university it was, where he was storing documents there as well in a closet that Chinese officials had keys to. More news from the National Review. Stay with me now. Democrats propose $20,000 fines for gas stations that don't warn customers about climate change. WTF. The climate change, I don't like pollution. I don't like pollution. I consider myself an environmentalist. But show me the proof. Now, I know that exhausts from gas-powered motor vehicles is pollution. However, carbon monoxide is not carbon dioxide. More from the National Review. Trump warns that violence against Tesla dealerships will be deemed domestic terrorism. It's not. If you attack, vandalize, shoot up, burn things for a political cause, that's terrorism. That's the whole point of terrorism. Look up the definition. Reuters. Workers remove DC Black Lives Matter Plaza mural to avoid funding cuts. DC Mayor Muriel Bowser pledged to redesign the plaza in response to Republicans' threat to cut the city's transportation funding unless it was renamed. So Washington, D.C. is under the purview of the federal government. So they're just exercising their power in the fact that since the Republicans control the federal government, that they're going to pressure Muriel Bowser to finally take or remove the Black Lives Matter road paint. Because Black Lives Matter is a communist organization. I'm not going to digress too much into that. That we were duped. That was all. The whole COVID thing was a psyop, and they interjected this a divisive catalyst around George Floyd to upend as some sort of cultural warfare active measures going on. In the blueprint of the socialist revolution, or a color revolution, if you want to get more contemporary. GOP lawmaker calls trans Dem Mr. McBride, abruptly ends hearing after ultimatum from another Dem. Mr. Chairman, have you no decency? Representative Keating of Democrat of Massachusetts questioned. Yeah, my Rumble is still hanging up. Tomorrow, if you want to follow me live, you can go to my YouTube channel. I'll be live there definitely tomorrow because I can't take another day of this hanging up. So Just the News is reporting, stay with me now, California voter ID initiative launched. Trump wants fire aid relief contingent on such reform. So we just went through a little while ago, we were talking about the Federalist who said that a minority of people think the elections are fair and there's no voter malfeasance going on or what have you. There is. And especially in places like California, voter ID initiative launched. I'm going to get into this article right now. State Assemblyman Carl DeMaio, Republican of San Diego, and Bill SLA, Republican of Corona, launch a ballot measure campaign to mandate voter identification in California elections, citing a new poll found that policy among 68% of likely California voters. So they like it there. Like the Federalist poll found also is that meshes with this poll that says only 40-some percent, 42% of folks think that elections are fairly run. You should have voter ID. There's no reason why you can't get an identification card, even if you don't drive. There's really no reason. And because the elections are rife with misrepresentations, and I think the whole country is, the whole Social Security and everything that you can, if there's a way to commit fraud, there's someone willing to do it. Justin News is reporting on this. Colorado House Committee considers semi-automatic firearms bill. I've went over this before. Basically, what we're talking about here is this bill that was going to ban the sale or purchase of any semi-automatic rifles, shotguns, or gas-operated handguns that take detachable magazines, which is all semi-automatics. Exempting firearms with permanently fixed magazines. I don't know why that makes a difference. And then they amended the bill, and that said if you have a training course and are vetted by law enforcement, then you could buy these firearms. So that's basically what we have here in Connecticut. You have to take a NRA sponsored firearms training course, and you have to go through a background check. Yeah, I get it. Fingerprinted and do all this stuff. I don't know if that helps or not. I mean, you should definitely be checked to make sure you're not a felon. So I think that's, but I think even to propose such a thing of a specific category of weapons, anything with a detachable magazine, a gas powered. So that excludes bolt guns, bolt rifles. So gas powered. Well, it says any semi-automatic rifle, so I guess gas powered, not a bolt action, but still, that's most firearms. I think that's ridiculous. But I already covered that story, so let's move on. Fox News, common pain medication could reduce cancer spread. Study finds aspirin could target cancer cells that have metastasized from tumors. New study from the University of Cambridge, which found that aspirin could reduce cancer metastasis spread by stimulating participants' immune system. So we know that daily dose of small aspirin is great it has all around medical benefits. The problem is it can cause bleeding. So I usually take a baby aspirin maybe once a week, maybe sometimes once a month, as a preventative. Particularly if you're worried about cardiovascular disease, it's better than taking a blood thinner. Prescription blood thinner. All right, getting into some tech news. The Associated Press, AI made its way into the vineyards. Here's how the technology is helping make your wine. I'm not going to get into the way it makes your wine. I'm just going to get into the way that AI is displacing jobs. It's everywhere now. It's getting into the federal government. People aren't going to realize the impact AI is going to make until it's too late. Fox News is reporting robot uses lasers to make chemical-free farming a reality. This is how the new farming tech is redefining weed control. So they go, there's a little, like they have those arms that water. They're going to have the same thing and they zap weeds. But you need AI, I guess, or visual recognition to find the weed. Hey, I'm all against using pesticides and herbicides. I try to eat all organic produce for the simple reason that the glyphosate is a carcinogen. Wall Street Journal, China is mapping the seabed to unlock new edge in warfare. Beijing's exploration of distant waters brings security fears and complaints. Yeah, well, the Chinese, in league with the globalist left, are indeed trying to become the dominant power. And however they see fit of doing that, they're going to pursue it. So there's even more reason why we should consider China an adversary, an enemy. There's no reason we need to have hostilities. But we shouldn't be using the wealth of the United States to empower our adversary. And that's exactly what was done. Thank you, Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon. And I have in the past said Richard Nixon was a pretty good president, except for that. He did end the Vietnam War, but whatever. The Guardian reports fears mount over Akash Patel's use of FBI to prosecute left-wing protest groups, concerns over crackdown on anti-fascist and Black Lives Matter movements as Trump loyalists take control of agency. Why is this so important? Get into the story here. For years, Donald Trump has also called for designating Antifa, or more broadly, all anti-fascist activists. That's not true. It was Antifa. This is the problem with the Guardian and their reporting. It's not in all anti-fascist activists. Antifa, well, I'm not going to get into it here, but they're murderers also. I wouldn't be surprised if they found that Antifa was responsible for Jamie White's murder. As an official domestic terrorist organization, while that has not been materialized into official policy, Trump's top national security leaders at the FBI, CIA, and Pentagon are into carrying out his agenda, as they should be. Even from inside the FBI, an anonymous agent has publicly warned that the domestic counterterrorism strategy could switch from inquiries against hyper-violent far-right to left-wing protest movements. So let's look here to... Now, black is white and white is black. So if you know anything about propaganda, inquiries into mischaracterization, hyper-violent far-right. Okay, who is the hyper-violent far-right? What, J6? That was hyper-violent? And then left-wing protest movements. So the left wing isn't hyper-violent. They're just protest movements. What about the Zizian cult? They're left-wing. They didn't murder 6 people. What about, off the top of my head, I could name 6 instances where Antifa members murdered people, right-wingers. Aren't they hyper-violent? What about all the Black Lives Matter riots? See, the left wing is protest movements and activists. The right wing is far hyper-violent, far right, extremist. Because it's left wing, not far left, right? It just... And who's behind it all? Well, rich fuckers like Warren Buffett. This 94-year-old stock market legend saw the Trump slump coming. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway is well positioned to withstand the downturn. Where they talk about in the Telegraph, Warren Buffett is not an ice cream eating, nice old Midwestern man. He is understandably backing and cheering on the global investment into corporate global fascism. So rich people basically rule the world. So this guy was partner with Charlie Munger. And so if you know who Charlie Munger is, he's all roots for China, and all the stock market, all the industrial titans all love China. Because when you're rich and powerful, democracy is like herding cats. It's much easier, and as I said before, to deal with authoritarians because you just have to deal with one person or one party that, you know, there's no dissent in the party. So Greenland had an election. The AP is reporting Greenland's election winners pushed back against Trump's wish to take control of the island. Well, if you knew really what was going on here, the reality is that the center right won the elections in Greenland. So they want to stay sovereign and be independent. Great. But you'll see all over the world is moving center right or conservative, because the global liberal order has been exposed for what it is, which is a authoritarian agenda, the New World Order, coming to a theater near you in 2030. BBC is reporting final ruling bars far-right Georgescu from Romanian vote. Now, if you didn't know what happened here, I covered this yesterday briefly. Kalin Georgescu was the far-right, was the conservative leader that was overwhelmingly elected in the election. And so the EU and the CIA came in and said, nope, election is null and void. No election here. Sorry, there's no election. Now, the guy that won the election is being banned from running in the election because of overwhelming support. It's sort of what they did here in the United States and what they did in Brazil and what they did all over the place. If they could ban Viktor Orban, they'd ban him. And because Romania doesn't want to fight the Russians. So Georgescu was had a firm stance about getting involved in the war in Ukraine. And boy, the NATO and the CIA didn't like that in a bit. So if you do, as a nation state, if you do something the CIA doesn't like, doesn't fit into their agenda, well, they're gonna take you out. They're gonna launch a color revolution, maybe in concert with George Soros or other NGOs, cause discontent, and overthrow the government, or just cancel the election. Democracy dies in darkness. New York Post admitted Hezbollah terrorist finally set to be deported a year after he crossed the border and said he hoped to make a bomb. New York-bound migrant Basil Abadi, 22, admitted ties to a terrorist group and ambitions that he was captured by border agents and was immediately held in custody. And so he was never out in the general public, thank God. And then how it relates to what's happening at Columbia. The Wall Street Journal, faculty on faculty war erupts at Columbia University as Trump targets elite school. Humanities professors clash with scientists over the handling of campus protests. Was it campus protests? It was. Well, they were in the building and they were harassing and keeping Jewish students from getting to class. And who was the leader of the protest? New York Post is reporting Mahmoud Khalil supporters arrested after a clash with NYPD as pro-Hamas Columbia graduate faces deportation. And She wasn't deported, but she left. One American News is reporting Rosie O'Donnell has moved to Ireland, alluding to Trump's election win. Good riddance. Does Ireland have squirrels? Are there squirrels in Ireland? Then she won't. They're not. Then she won't have any friends. Washington Post is reporting Texas measles outbreaks grows while New York and California report new cases. And it's all RFK Jr.'s fault. It's not his fault. It's really the intelligence fault because they want a crisis or cause to push back against RFK Jr. So they needed this measles outbreak. It's just strange that there's an outbreak and then it grows. I don't think the Mennonites were getting on planes and flying to New York and California. So I don't know how this relates to what RFK Jr. is doing, but it does in the case that they need a crisis, and there will be crises facing all of Trump's cabinet picks. Kash Patel will have his hands full. Pam Bondi will have her hands full, as will Tulsi Gabbard. I think she's the most confident of all. RFK Jr. and others. And certainly Besant, Lutnick. They're going to try to derail what Trump's doing and certainly undermine any successes he might have. And I think there will be successes. I would hold out a month or two before you start making economic predictions. So tomorrow I'm going to live cast, I'm going to simulcast live 10 a.m. to YouTube and Rumble, because the Rumble keeps hanging up now. So I'll go through my hard drive and see if it's something I'm doing. It seems to be recording fine. It's just a live stream, so I might have to turn down the bitrate or something. Anyway, thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. Stay hip to the trick. Check me out every day, 10 a.m. live on Rumble and YouTube. Soon coming, because this is, like I said, I did a test the other day. There were no problems on YouTube, so check out the links in the description. Liberty merch for sale from the Alex Jones store. If you use my link, I get a couple bucks. Check out my other website, limpop.org, which may become defunct pretty soon. I set it up using GoDaddy, and they're just a ripoff, so gonna have to knock that down. All right, stay tuned. Later tonight, we're gonna have a Tuesdays with Perry. I think it's episode 109. So check us out. Usually go live 9 or 9:15 or so. So see you then. If not, I'll see you tomorrow morning. Respect.